We're live. Hey everyone, I'm Malorie Cooper, writing under MD Cooper, and this is Ken Hall.
And I'm
He is
the
the
creative director on Destiny Sword. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured I'd let you do your intro, but just not
Oh,
tell you
sure.
now.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So Ken's the creative director on the game Destiny Sword. I'm actually the lead writer for this game, and we're doing a little stream today to talk about the story, the backstory, how we're working really hard to make this a living world where you can play from multiple sides of the conflict and have a meaningful impact on what actually happens and feel like you're really actually immersed in the game.
Yeah, I mean it's really exciting because it's almost like a big, massively multiplayer choose your own adventure book. I mean, it's got this living story that the players interact with, but they can also shape as it goes forward. So, it's really exciting to experience and explore. But at the same point, we're going to find out just how much of a nightmare it is for you to keep track of all this and how you write for something that's evolving all the time. So I'm really excited to sort of get behind the scenes here.
Yeah, as we've been sort of talking about how we're going to really flesh out, because I mean, one thing that's unique about this game is that the NPCs are all effectively unique characters. And I don't think I've ever played anything before. I mean, you've played probably more games than I have in research, but I've never played anything where the
Sure.
NPCs are that unique. Like they're always these people are slotted in to do a particular thing, whereas this game,
Mhm.
they're all going to be living, breathing, dynamic characters.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting dynamic. We've got these infinite characters with unprecedented depth and diversity, and we sort of use that as a bit of a tagline, but it's actually true. The game that the technology gives every character in the game a unique backstory. It comes from a unique planet, which you've written some amazingly interesting backgrounds on these planets, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment.
Mhm.
But it gives them this unique personality and these unique backstory of life events that have shaped them and got them to where they are. So the way they react to events is all sort of directed by that, and it creates this really interesting kind of soap opera. Like, you could almost just let the world interact on its own and watch it, and that would be exciting enough. But the fact that you get to poke it and prod it and see what direction and what effect your actions have is even more cool.
Yeah, one of the ways I've been kind of thinking about it in a way is that this is really like a giant Dungeons and Dragons campaign,
Mhm.
um, where it's always this fresh world that you're playing in, and when you play with your guild, that's gonna be like your party in a way,
That's
and you're
true.
gonna go into the dungeons and have combat, but you're gonna come back because when we play D&D, really the fun part of D&D is like all the crazy stuff that happens in between, actually going out and fighting. It's like when character XYZ does something stupid, and now you gotta get them out of jail or something like that. Like it's gonna
Yeah.
be stuff like that. Like, oh wow, we were doing really well, and then Jimbo went over there and sold his gun for drugs or something like
Yeah,
it
or
can be like
had a
weird
fight in
stuff
the
like this.
bar, and yeah, exactly. No,
Yeah. Yeah, he's in the break now for like 20 days and you can't take him on a mission. I mean, I'm just making crazy things up that we could do, but we want to make it that varied and that wild, and that
mhm.
your characters or your team are going to be like these people that are going to be doing real things and unpredictable things, which of course is tricky for me and you as well, because we don't know
Sure.
what they might do in some
No, that's right.
situations.
But I mean, that's kind of what really creates that emotional engagement between the player and their character. The fact that instead of just being numbers on a spreadsheet, they do become these living, breathing entities, and we invest so much time getting to know them and helping to shape their development and support them through their ongoing sort of emotions and things like that. And so it really raises the stake when we wind up taking them into combat and putting them in harm's way, and reinforces the social aspects of the game when our friends have to pull our butts out of the fire when we've got somebody hurt, and they have to help us put them back together and get them back onto the field again. So it's such a window into so many different possibilities, and it really is the core of the game. So yeah, no, it's
Totally.
it's really exciting. I mean, maybe a good place to start is kind of get you to set the scene for us. Talk about a bit about the universe and the current
Absolutely, yeah.
situation and what led to where we're going to find the game.
Yeah, so I remember back when you and I first met, at a hotel not far from where I live. Ken came down. I lived near Boston, and Ken came down from Toronto. We met for like, I think it was 3 days,
Yep,
just
to
talking about
brainstorm.
your vision for the game, where it was going. And of course, Ken reached out to me because he'd read some of my books and really liked how I dealt with the fact that when you're in combat and when you're dealing with stressful situations, it's not just like, yay, we went and shot everybody. Now we go to the bar and have drinks. And we'll do it all again tomorrow. It's like here's the real cost on that these things have, and not in a way where it makes it unfun to read, because a lot of times if you immerse yourself in stories about how terrible war is, it's not really a fun read. So
Yeah.
there's a balance to making an entertaining story and also making something that is real. And I've got some practice at that. So Ken reached out to me. We started talking about it, and it was really interesting. This world that that Ken had come up with. It was this idea, this world called Cyprus, and it was this lush garden planet, but it had this really valuable resource on it. And you had multiple parties vying for control of this resource and kind of trashing the planet while they're at it.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, right. I mean, when we started it, it wasn't quite. It didn't feel quite as real back then, because it was like, it was before the pandemic. It was before sort of things were quite as polarized as they are in the
huge
world right
forest
now.
fires and the huge
Yeah,
hurricane
before
season,
Australia and
Armageddon,
California lit on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like we started. Even before the pandemic hit, it was like California, Australia lit on fire, and we're like, damn, like this is it's. I mean, it's interesting too how you can. I think it's neat to see. A lot of times when you see in movies and in games and whatnot, you see a planet being destroyed, you think, oh, the whole thing looks trash. But no, there's lots of places on our planet that look great, and there's other places that are trash. So we're going to try and show some of that in the game, how you can be in some places they're terrible, and some places they're still really nice. So of course, there's the two main in this universe that that Ken conceived of. There, it's not like an Earth colony type scenario. It's just another universe that has humans in it, and that's really kind of the only connection it has to sort of the way that we are. And there's an area called the core systems, and that's run by the galactic government, and that formed after sort of a period of exploration and whatnot. But there's also another group called the consortium, and they're all the major corporations that also have a lot of sway. And there's a smaller faction called the Gestalt, who is the judiciary, and those are sort of the main government factions. And over time, the consortium has been gaining more power, and the galactic government has been trying to control them. And the galactic government has more of a peacekeeping force called the Protectorate. And then, of course, the consortium has their own security force called Securicorps, because government types are super creative when it comes to names like that. You can imagine, like in a galactic scenario, like if you're a company and you're sending out an exploration team to some unknown planet to see if they have any resources, of course you're going to want security, and you're going to want to guard your investment, and stuff like that. So you can kind of, and we kind of get into that as to why they have these things and what they do. And but one of the things about the game is that, as Ken and I were talking, the game really is going to focus on the planet of Cyprus, which is actually a moon, but it's effectively the size of a planet. But we wanted to kind of understand the larger universe and where everything else is. So we talked about writing a prequel novel. And what we ended up doing was writing a novel that takes place in multiple different places around the galaxy, but eventually comes to Cyprus. And it sort of sets the stage for everything that goes wrong later, that then, of course, creates the game. And that is Lucidium Run, which is a game that I wrote, and then we released in February of this year. Yeah, Ken's got his own copy too there. Because we have the 1 and the 2 that we both signed from each other.
Yep.
So
Exactly. Look at that. These are going to be extremely valuable someday.
Right. That's right. When I'm old and I need money, I'm auctioning this off.
That's right.
But yeah, so it got me really excited to think of the world and the setting that we're in. And then on top of that, as a player, you're going to be able to command a team of people that either are a protectorate and are working for the government and are the peacekeeping sort of force, or you can play for Securicorps. And normally, like, you think like, oh, it's the corporation, they're the bad guys, but we want to make it so they're not really bad per se. They have their own motivations, and they're not all evil, and they actually are doing some of their own good too. So it's not like it's light side versus dark side. It's like, hey, this is the world. It's gray. How are you going to make it better? As a commander in your situation, or how are you just going to exploit the hell out of it and be a terrible person? I mean, it's technically possible. You can make decisions like that in the game.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really like about the way we're both approaching the story. And for those that aren't aware, the series of books of Mal's that I read originally that really attracted me to her writing was the Rika series of novels, which is about a power armored soldier in the future who's gone through some difficult experiences. And as you were saying, I love the way that not only does it deal with the action and the excitement, but it also deals with some of the downtime and how these characters process and deal and approach these issues, mentally and emotionally as well. But that's the sort of thing we're going to find out, that sometimes, you don't get to bad places by being evil. Sometimes the best of intentions can lead you down, dark paths, and accidents or unforeseen consequences, and all these sorts of things happen. And that's sort of one of the things we really wanted to play with in this living universe, was to have it be that, look, you're always in your mind trying to do the right thing. You don't have all the information, and that means that sometimes you go off in the wrong direction.
Yep.
And it's going to be neat to see what effect that has on the world and how players react to that. Do you keep go, well, I'm here now, I might as well just carry on, or do they sort of try to claw back in a different direction? And it'll be neat
Yeah.
to see where they want to take the story too.
And of course, there's also things like the fog of war is at play, and there are elements
Yep.
out there who don't want you to know everything. So
Or who
there could
want
be
to
times
misinform you.
as yeah, exactly. There can be times as the story unfolds where you're getting the wrong information, and you might be
Yep.
making decisions based on information that's not really going to be in your best interest later on. So, and that's something to be
Exactly.
one of these we really want to do. We want to make it so that when you play the game from other sides, because there's a single player campaign in addition to the MMO
Mhm.
aspects of it, you're going to be like, wait a second, that's not what we heard when we were on the other side.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, no,
which from a writer's standpoint is really exciting to be able to do that and put all that together.
yeah, I think just watching the way that these paths fork and branch and come back together, and then, like you say, the replayability, like once you've done it a couple of times, getting that perspective and going, oh, I see how all this, or I missed these cues at the beginning, or
Yeah,
I should have seen
exactly.
this coming, but I didn't even know what that meant when I saw it the
Yeah.
first time. And
That's
so
a
yeah.
really cool thing. I think I'm a really big fan of when I involve and get invested in a story. I really need to believe that the people making the story knew what they were doing when they started. They actually had like a vision for where the story was going to go. Because when you invest yourself in stuff where you can, at a certain point, you're like, these guys have no idea where it's going. They're just making it up as they go along.
Sure.
You have trouble sticking with it. And
Mhm.
we have a vision for where this story is going to go, how it's all going
Yep.
to unfold. So even in your very first interactions with the game, there are going to be clues which you won't be able to recognize until later because it's like a real world. So all of the
Yep.
elements that support the ultimate story are all going to be there. You're just not going to know where they're pointing yet, which is something I'm really
Absolutely.
excited about. And
Yeah.
it's even
No.
in the art. Like there's I think there's already even stuff in some of the art that's out that is like hinting at things that players
The,
won't learn about for a long time.
That's right. Not until sort of the end of the campaign and some of the spoilers
Yeah,
are revealed for sure.
which I
So
get
yeah,
super excited about.
let's talk a little bit about Lucidium Run, and talk about what sort of story does that tell, and how does that set the stage for Destiny's Sword?
So, before I started writing Lucidium Run, I worked out like a fairly long timeline for the galaxy because whenever you write a story, and I kind of learned this back when I first read Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is such an amazing story because you feel like it's a real world because
Mhm.
the characters are constantly referencing things that happened in the past. They are built upon an existing history. So I did a bit of a timeline, and I sort of came up with why this lush planet of Cyprus was just alone and no one really knew about it. And I created this scenario where the original settlers were sponsored by a corporation, but that corporation went bankrupt. And I believe also their home system was attacked by someone. And then later on, another corporation who actually runs a hospitality industry across the galaxy
Mhm.
um, got a hold of all of the corporate assets from another corporation and discovered that there was like this world out there and it even had settlers on it. So they showed up and they had a bit of conflict with some of the original settlers, but eventually they worked out a way to actually use the world as a resort world and sort of create a symbiotic relationship. So the game starts with almost two groups of locals living on the planet.
Mhm.
And so does in the book as well, where you've got like the original settlers who are now kind of the natives because they've been there for hundreds and hundreds of years at this point. And then
Sure.
you have the Chindra Corporation who is trying to make a little bit of money off the planet as well. And it kind of works well for the people who live there because they get a little bit of trade in and out, as rich visitors come and drop crazy amounts of money on all sorts of weird stuff. But
Mhm.
underneath all of that, the planet has a lot of a certain mineral called lucidium. And lucidium is necessary for a lot of technology across the galaxy. and the supplies of Lucidium in the galaxy are running dangerously low. Um, and so the story follows a couple of different groups. It follows some kids actually on the planet of Cyprus who discover a whole bunch of Lucidium. They discover a cave and a lot of Lucidium in that cave, and it's a very pure crystalline form that's worth a lot more than just the regular ore. That's something actually the iron can do too. Yeah, there we go. It's one of the pictures from the book. One of the great things about the book is it has some amazing art, and in fact, I'm addicted to it. I kind of want to hire an artist to do art for a lot of my books now because that'd be amazing. And then at the same time, we also follow. Yeah, and that's like one of the resort areas on the planet. And we kind of the Chinger Corporation almost has like a bit of an Asian feel, and the Southeast Asian feel to a lot of their architecture and stuff like that. Because we wanted to, of course, do is not really make this game feel like a big Western European game either, too. So we want to make sure that as we did things, we had a good spread. And then even like I love the starship design that we have in this game. We have some really cool starships. And this particular ship is a freight hauler that also can has a sky hook where it can lift things off of planets and whatnot. So it's actually good in using in a mining operation because they don't have to come all the way down to pull stuff off the planet. So we have our main characters. Oh man, I have this thing where sometimes I forget characters' names. Samara. I was thinking there with an A all of a sudden. I read a lot of books, just my own defense. So sometimes I forget character names. So Samara runs this freighter that also has use in mining operations. And the galactic government basically creates a scenario where there's a gold rush on Lucidium. Mm-hmm. And they end up signing on to a team that's going around prospecting looking for Lucidium, because if you find big Lucidium veins on planets, you're going to get a major reward. And so there's the neat thing about this is we get introduced to characters from around the galaxy. And some of the characters actually used to work for the Protectorate, and some used to work for Securicorps, who are part of her crew. So you get a little bit of a taste of like what their viewpoints are, where they come from. And you also get to see some of the results of overmining on some planets, and also a little bit of a sneak peek into how the government works as well. And then the whole book culminates with, as you can imagine, planet with Lucidium. Kids found some Lucidium prospectors running around the galaxy trying to find
what
new.
Could go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly happen here? And that sets the stage then for what happens later on with the mass exploitation of Lucidium Run. And the great thing happens too is we meet a lot of the characters who are younger in this book who will then be major players in the campaign. So if you read this book, you're going to be like, wow, this guy who actually starts showing up in the campaign was actually one of the characters in the book. And you can really tell how those events set the stage. It's like the Star Wars prequels if they actually took the time to do them first and not the other way around.
And while we're talking about the book, we've actually got a really exciting competition to win your own copy of the book. And in conjunction with that, you'll get to create a character using our personality system. It's actually a little quiz that gives you some questions, and create a character based on your answers. If it's your own personality, great, or whatever you want to do, and then it'll run that character over the coming months of development through events in Lucidium Run. So you're going to actually get to experience, the events of Lucidium Run as you would experience events in our real game. So you're going to actually be able to become part of this novel. And then, so for the people that take that survey and wish list the game on Steam, those are the two of the conditions. There's also a couple other ways to enter the contest, but we'll put a link up to the contest. Oh, Malorie already did, which is fantastic.
There it is.
You're so far ahead of me. It's a good thing. But yeah, you get to enter the contest, but we'll give away actual copies of the book to some lucky winners that do that. So that's pretty exciting. So if you want to win a copy of Lucidium Run and read along with it, if not, it is on Amazon too, if you're not one of the lucky winners. So you can get a hold of it and read it, which is really exciting. But it is a fantastic book. I mean, Mal just did an amazing job. She's not giving herself the props she deserves here for the interesting twists and turns that we'll see in there. And I think it's just so
spoilers.
No, that's true too. But I think it's just so indicative of what we're going to see in the real game story. When we start to bring that to life, that there's just that's one of the things that amazes me about Mal is how she does plot these books out. in advance. So it really does, create this interweaving web that you're not entirely sure where you are along the way until you get to the end. And then everything made sense and it was a heck of a journey. And it's like, so I just love reading your stuff and can't wait till we actually get to really play it too.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. And the neat
Will
thing
be.
that then came out of writing the book and having, because I think even for the development team, it really helped to create like a real world,
Mhm.
behind the game,
Sure.
where you're like, oh, this is actually a real world. Here's where people live. Here's what they
Mhm.
talk about. Here's what they care about. Here's where they might be from. Here's what their daily life looks like. That helps make the game as you're making it and then playing it just feel a lot more realistic. To my mind, it's got its own
And I mean,
flavor.
that just goes back to what I was talking about before with your planets and backgrounds document, where you
Yeah.
know you wrote like a page for each planet, giving us things like some technical details that you wouldn't think about, like the diameter of the planet and the gravity and the axial tilt, the distance from its star. I mean, and all these shape the parameters of the planet. Was it a big ice ball, or was it where they had to farm underneath the glaciers, or was it
Yeah.
some kind of a technical industrial planet that had formed all these precious minerals and was in the process of being strip mined, or was a big refinery location, that kind of thing. So it's so neat. Like, I read through these one page descriptions of the planets, and we'll probably share some of them in our social media in the coming days.
Yeah, we should.
But it was so neat to, like, I mean, we just read those and suddenly the whole team was like, oh wow, we get it. It became real for us overnight, just reading those
Oh,
descriptions. And we've only got 3 of those planets in the demo, but it just the variety and characters that are being created coming from those planets. And we've got, I think, maybe in each planet we've got like 6 sort of life paths that these characters can take,
yeah.
and yet it's already creating this dynamic web of. And we jokingly make up stories, like we'll read the character backstory. It'll be like, oh, this character lost their parents in a mining accident, and so that'll create the personality that has a bit of grief and maybe trouble relating to people and stuff. But then the next step will be, oh, and they were a runner for a local street gang or something, but then they became an engineer and they worked in the
Yeah.
the climatology sector and stuff. And it's like, oh, so they're a rags to riches story, and they you can see in their personality that they have a really strong diligence and really strong kind of self belief, and that's what allowed them to pull themselves up. And just even those little stories that create themselves out of a few little pieces. So once we have the full spectrum, where we've got hundreds of planets that they can come from and all these different life experiences, I'm so excited for the future for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing, like the fact that we've got like all on top of just having these plants I described, like the character matrix they're going to go through. Like each plant's like, okay, there's a plant with a lot of, with really big university and a lot of bureaucracy. So of course your parents are more likely to have worked in one of those areas.
Mhm.
And then what you did in your teenage years and when you're a young adult, or the character, I should say, not you, the player, but the character,
Yep.
um, will affect that. So you're not going to have like on the main bureaucratic government planet, your parents didn't die in a mining accident, because that's just not
Yeah,
a thing that happens on that planet. Maybe
that's
your
right.
parents were were in the bureaucracy, and you were like working in a senator's campaign office or something like that, and you'll actually
Yep.
have these experiences for your characters. They're unique to where they live, and on top of that, some of the planets really like each other, and some of them don't.
Yep.
So you're going to end up with people in your squad, because you're of course the commander in charge of all of these people, trying to get them to work together as a team, who may not
For
like
sure.
each other for certain
Yep.
reasons, or they might really like each other because they might like, hey, yeah, our plans trade, and I actually interned, in an industry that like your planet, people in your planet use our product or something like that. So they're going to have these ways for them to talk to each other.
We've got Jake saying, my favorite was, we got a description, in one of the characters in their adolescent years was scarred for life working as wait staff.
That's that's entirely possible. I've worked in the service industry. You can totally be scarred for life from that.
You can tell that. So I'm just putting in some debug descriptions for now, but once we get kind of Mal's hands on it, and put in the beautiful descriptions and text, once we get all these systems in place, it'll kind of come a bit more to life. But it's funny, I've thrown in some quirky ones like that. So
Yeah, it's gonna be really neat, because like the thing I love about this stuff, and the fact I'm so excited that we're gonna get to build these characters this way, is it like one of my favorite things to do in Mass Effect was just to go through every possible character conversation I could
Mhm.
have.
Yep.
And like whenever I would do a mission, I would come back to the ship and talk to every freaking person on that ship trying to have like a new conversation. And I
Yep.
would get so bummed when there wasn't anything new to talk about. But that's not going to happen in this game because there's always going to be something that happened that some character is going to want to talk about. You're in a firefight, and it was miserable and raining. Like even something as little as that. Someone might be like,
Yeah.
can we like have a fight where it's dry for once? The last 6 combats, it's been raining. There's going to be stuff like that in the game that's really going to make it feel like it's going to feel like everything you did actually happened. Because sometimes when you play games, of course, I don't want to talk down about any game because, of
No.
course, everything is always progressing. Old games just couldn't do some of the stuff we can do now.
Sure.
But it's like you always like you'd have like this big thing happen. You're like, wow, no one even cares on the ship. Like no one's even talking about it. But this is going to be different. People are going to be talking about what actually happened.
And I mean, like even just looking at something as simple as the weather, like normally that's at the demo right now, for instance, it's just randomized, but we're actually going to build, because we've got your sort of physics about how the planet, well, this moon is sort of orbiting, and things like that. So we're going to have these seasons that are actually, it looks like a year, seasonal year is going to be about sort of 4 months. So a season will last about a month. So in the winter you'll get predominantly snowy and cold weather, and in the summer it'll
Yep.
be dry and hot a lot, and in the springtime it might be rainy a lot. There'll be a monsoon season kind of thing, and so it's
Yep.
these are the elements that are going to make the world feel real, because these things are going to change all the time.
Yep. And the neat thing and Ken, I'm a huge hard science fiction nerd. So, there's been periods where Ken's like, we're going to do this because it's the rule of cool. I'm like, yeah, but I have to write something for this. I have to like have text that explains how this works. So we butt heads sometimes, but it's all good
Yeah,
natured and
I'm a
fun. It's good to
sci-fantasy geek and a space opera geek, and Mal's hard
yeah.
sci-fi. So we
Yeah.
do we
I'm
do
like,
kind of.
no, this
It's
doesn't
nice
work
to
this
pull
way.
each other and keep each other on the straight and narrow. Make sure that
Good.
it's
Yeah.
it's sexy and
But
cool, but at the same point realistic and believable.
yeah, but it is stuff that kind of is neat because once you like you mentioned, once you get into like here's how big this planet is, here's this axial tilt that causes it to have this particular environment, and then with Cyprus, we wanted to make it so that the months in game time would only last about 3 months
Mhm.
of game time. So you can so that but I think your plan is like it'll go through a whole year every full month, every 4 months of MMO time,
Yep.
um, give or take. But so we actually worked out the physics so that there's this world orbiting another planet. So it's orbiting a gas giant, but its tilt is such that as it goes through its orbit, it actually has the regular kinds of seasons, just like Earth does as a result of that. So I like that because I feel like it creates these boundaries around the story that you can't get around. Like it's winter because it's winter and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's going to last this
Yes.
long.
Yep.
And that makes so that all the characters now and the gameplay and the story has to fit within that. And it makes you be more creative, quite honestly, because you're like, you can never take an easy way out. You're like, well, we have to deal with the fact that it's winter. What are we going to do?
That's right. So yeah, I know it creates all these kind of stories, because as you say, we got these characters who suddenly say, "Oh, I can't stand the cold. What happened? Or this is a colder winter than it was last year." Or,
Yeah. And the
whatever it
character
is.
that's from the ice planet's like, stop bitching, it's gorgeous out.
Slap everybody around saying
Yeah.
this is height of the summer. It
Oh,
and one of the things, you mentioned it a little bit earlier on, when we were talking about the vibes of the galaxy, and the fact that we didn't want this to be significantly constrained to any one particular culture or ethos or anything like that. But it really has been a vision of ours to kind of make this world as inclusive and diverse as possible. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that sort of flavors the story, and how you approach
yeah.
that.
So one of the things that we're doing, and of course, there's the book uses gendered pronouns because we just in the amount of time we had trying to write a book without gender pronouns is actually really difficult because you use them as shorthand all the time to be able to tell characters apart without using their name every single time you reference them. But we don't have to worry about that as much in the game, which is actually really nice because you can use lots of other indicators for who you're talking about. And I'm really excited about that. How we're going to create a world where because for whatever reason, everything on Earth gets gendered, and English is actually probably one of the better languages for that, where we don't gender a lot of things all the time. But this is a culture where they just don't do that, so you're not going to encounter a lot of forced gender on the characters. You're going to look at them and you're going to think, is that a guy or a girl? And you realize it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter to them, which I think is like a really neat thing to do. It's I wouldn't go quite so far to say that like it's non-binary for them, because for these people in this culture, non-binary is kind of their default.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, I guess in that respect, it is kind of a unique game where like a non-binary type person is the default type of person. And you might, of course, you still have people who would appear to be very much on the binary one way or the other, but it's not like something that's expected. And I think it's a science fiction always gives us the opportunity to sort of like create a scenario like that and say, what would this be like,
Mm-hmm.
because the why for why we're certain ways may not be their why,
Yeah.
which can be really neat.
And
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I knew actually when I first talked to you, and you told me that one of the main characters, sort of in the marketing narrative, was transgender. I'm like, okay, this is going to be the place for me.
Yeah, no, and we didn't even know at that point. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
for me, it was really important that we take away a lot, because I really wanted to kind of dig down into, okay, what causes, the fractures and the divisiveness and the discrimination, and I really wanted to, you know, dig down into the deeper aspects of it. So I wanted to take away all the things we typically discriminate against in our
Mm-hmm.
current society. So we wanted to take away the concept of gender, take away the concept of race and culture, so that there weren't any of those things that were familiar to us as, this, different categorizations, I guess.
Yeah.
And just to then explore, okay, so what is the point of leverage? What's going to become the point of differentiation and discrimination, and it really boils down ultimately to those in power are going to exploit those without it, and that's what we're going to kind of see, I think, as the story plays out, is how does that dynamic work, and how can people who at some points appear to have no power, how can they gain it, how can they kind of protect themselves? And so it's kind of a really interesting narrative. But as you say, the common themes are of sort of gender and race and stuff like that are kind of missing, and that's been a challenge to write. We initially did try to explore writing without gender in the writing, and realized, okay, that was going to be too difficult. Certainly from an
Yeah.
English language, I know there's some languages that don't have everything gendered. But yeah, it's interesting to sort of see it evolve and see it come together. But that's been the underpinning of our whole character system now, is that is generating these characters that are really completely unique, and they are who they are, and their experiences have shaped them rather than our preconceptions, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so I think that'll be interesting for people to. What we wanted to make was a really inclusive and safe environment for people to explore interacting with these characters, where you can as you say, you can be the good guy, you can be the bad guy, you can see how that affects their development and their emotions. And it's kind of a sandbox in that sense, an emotional sandbox, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys have spent a lot of time on it, on the Insight engine, which puts all that together. And you've actually been working with psychologists and
Mm-hmm.
people who develop personality matrices and examining and whatnot. So these characters aren't just
Sure.
like our idea of how people behave in these situations, but we've worked with a lot of professionals to make sure that's all developed properly.
And then it's one of the things that we're hoping is that ultimately, because of course in a game where getting to know your characters is kind of the winning strategy for success, empathy is a really important tool for you. You're actually trying to read the character and understand their issues and their kind of the best way to motivate them and encourage them. And so to a certain extent, we're hoping that maybe it'll even rub off on people, that the the kind of inputs that we're learning, right? The how to, the empathy, I guess, we're gaining for these characters might be transferable. It might help us engage with people in our own lives that are either going through difficult circumstances, or that are maybe on a journey that's different from our own, and we have to figure out how to kind of reconcile that difference and be able to communicate effectively. And so who knows, maybe it's something that like Wonder Bread, right? It tastes good, but it also has some stuff that's good for you on the inside.
That's something that like I'm really I'm really optimistic about that this could actually be really good for that, where it helps people understand where other people are coming from. Like that was a really big thing for me in my journey. When I came out as transgender, I mean, before that, I was white and appeared to be male and had blonde hair and blue eyes. Like, I was basically playing life on easy mode, and I
Hmm.
kind of, sort of, even though I intellectually knew that some people have life harder, without ever really having the ability to empathize with that, I never had the right level of understanding. And now that I've transitioned and come out as transgender, I understand very well that when people say I'm having a hard time, a lot of times they're telling the truth, and you should believe they're telling the truth by default. And so, yeah,
Sure.
so hopefully this game is gonna you're gonna get to know people who are in all sorts of different situations and be like, okay, and maybe when your friend says something similar to what you saw in the game, you might be like, oh, maybe they did actually go through some of this stuff and it's actually hard, and these are the types of reactions they're going to have and the
Yeah.
problems it's going to cause. And here's also like the sorts of things that make them feel better,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
whatnot. So it might be great. I'm
I like
cautiously
it.
optimistic.
Exactly. I like Jen's comment there. Contagious empathy could save the world. I think that's a great one. So who
Yeah, that
knows?
is
We'll
pretty
see.
awesome. Totally.
But yeah, it's a good goal to aim for sure. But so I mean
Yeah.
that's kind of some of the evolving storyline of the game. But there's also on. So we've got this campaign story arc, which is going to have all these incredible twists and turns, and it's going to give us a real sense of actually being part of this campaign from the beginning to the end of it. And there is a conclusion to that initial campaign story arc. But then on top of that, we're going to evolve the story with these global narrative events, that are going to bring new locations. So I guess they'll play out almost like a massively multiplayer escape room experiences, right? Where they're basically like DLC. We're going to have these themed events, like maybe it's try and stop a saboteur aboard a spaceship, or whatever, or there's a find of something's been found in a cave, or we have to rescue some people that have been trapped in a cave, and in doing so we find a big find of lucidium, or we find a sign of something else that may show up later on, who knows. But yeah, I think these sort of events are going to be really cool ways to explore the world in new directions to actually shape it. And I think what's most exciting for me is that at the end of these events, whatever happens, like if it's the saboteur and we blow up the ship, we don't save the day and the ship crashes, it's going to change all the maps. They'll have the trail of destruction and the crash scene in them. But at the end of that event, you're going to write a new novel in the sequence that's going to encapsulate and summarize all the things that happened. But players will actually get the chance to earn their way into that book by their actions. If they did something that stood out to us, if they made the ultimate sacrifice so people could succeed, or if they won the event or did something fan favorite that nobody thought, and everybody goes, okay, that's we gotta uh,
Yeah,
you know
totally.
put that into the lore, and so people can actually become part of the story literally. I the chance to be an actual character in a best-selling author's novel. I think that's just so exciting. uh,
Yeah, it's gonna be really neat, and also just the fact that like people are gonna come up with stuff that I could never imagine. So it's kind of exciting for me too. It's like it'll be like, wow, that's never thought that would happen. Now I get to like write some sort of crazy thing into the book. Yeah, it's one of those truth is stranger than fiction sort of things that we're gonna get to play
sure.
with.
Yeah,
There-
absolutely.
There'd be neat things too, because like there's different regions in the on Cyprus and different cities and whatnot. So some of these things
Mhm.
could even be like a battle for a given city. And if the consortium takes the city, or sorry, Secure Corp takes the city, or the Protector takes the city, then it will change.
Yep.
From there on in. Like if you're playing in the MMO phase, like they own that city now.
Yep.
And that will actually have like a real impact. And who knows, like we could maybe even like some elements could even be in the game, like a particular commander, they
Sure.
were instrumental in taking and holding that city, like maybe like they get a park named after them, or the
Yeah.
characters talk about them and stuff like that.
Or even change the way the mechanics of the game work. So a particular an explosion at a big plasma processing facility or something might change the effectiveness of plasma weapons in the game, or something like that, or change the cost, or whatever, or certain
Uh,
abilities or effects that we had. Armor might like when there was the big earthquake that took out the chip processing capacity in Japan. I mean, suddenly you're dealing with either more expensive or inferior products. So the armor in the game could suddenly come from a secondary or tertiary source and might be half as effective as it was before because,
Yep.
the primary manufacturer has just been eaten by a black hole or something. Who knows
Yep.
what.
Or if the ship that got sabotaged was bringing in, kinetic rounds for rifles,
Yep.
and it got blown up, like you might find that your faction doesn't have a certain type of weapon available because there's no ammunition for it. You
Exactly.
know.
So it's kind of
So
neat. All these sort of things that'll change. Even having zones that change their behavior. Maybe they're irradiated, or there's big forest fires going on now. So that your characters, if they spend too long in it, have smoke inhalation. And well, that's a
yep.
little too close to home right now. But
Right now that is, yes. Yeah.
it's pretty scary. But yeah, no, I mean, just the capacity, the depth of things we can do is unbelievable. There's no limit at this point. So it's such a neat world to dream into, I guess.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I can't wait to really get down into the not only like writing all that dialogue, but writing the story that you can play from both sides. It's such a challenging thing because very few people get to do that, like write a story from both sides and make it so you can be the good guy on both sides.
Yeah,
And
or that you
I
at
mentioned
least think
it
you're
before,
the
but I'm
good guy.
excited about that.
Yeah,
What was that?
exactly. I said at least think you're the good guy on both sides.
Exactly. Think you're the
Find
good
out
guy.
that on either side you're probably not the good guy at all anyway.
Not quite
Who
as
knows?
good as you thought you were. But it'll be
But
neat then because you'll get the opportunity to try and do the right thing, to
yeah.
be better than the orders you've been given and
Hmm.
stuff like that.
Yep. Find out that a lot of it's in the little things, right? Do you give some of your resources to the local population as you're patrolling through the areas, and therefore create a great relationship with them? But then you've got to go without yourself, or at least manage better yourself. And so yeah, there'll be lots of neat decisions, for everybody to kind of really, I guess, impose their personality, but also express their personality into the world, and see what kind of difference it makes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Um, what else have we got on tap? I'm just wondering if there's anything else you wanted to chat about.
I think that's the bulk of it. Yeah,
Looks
we
like
can
we've got
talk
a
about all.
few minutes left here. Do you want me to share my screen and show some of the character stuff to people?
Yeah, let's
Do
do
people
that.
want to see that?
Let's get some context to everything we've been talking about.
Let me see how this works.
Live technology demo, folks. Here we go.
All right. Can you see the game okay on your stream
There we
there?
go. I can see it.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know if the audio is going to come through or not. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. At least we can have a look. So what we're on here, this is a support ship. So this is the main headquarters for a guild, a team of players. And we have all these different rooms on the support ship that we can jump between. The command center where we can set up our account and work on building the ship up and as a collective, and we can buy the cards and abilities and things that we can use in the game and stuff like that with the game resources. We've got the medical bay where we can heal characters that are wounded, repair bay where we can craft and upgrade our items and build even our own mechs that we build from salvage that we can take into battle, and the guild hall where we can interact with people. But I think that what we really want to look at is the characters. So if we
Mhm.
click and recruit these characters, we can see immediately every character in the game has these sort of life events. So I can just have a look at their character sheet here, and we can see that let's look at Jolie here. So she was born on Diamira. She grew up in a poor farming family. She went to agri school for farming and then worked as a climate engineer, perfecting Diamira's challenging atmospheric conditions. So she's got quite kind of an upward trajectory, which is great. And she's got a fairly balanced emotional state, which is fantastic. And these events all shape their stats, they shape their emotions, but they also shape their personality. And when we first meet these characters, we won't know where they are in the personality. We have to talk to them and figure it out. And as we talk to them, it gradually reveals itself. And I can just use a developer cheat here to take off the fog of war and show where this character actually is. So We can see she's a little bit introverted. She's not as socially bold as others, but she's got a really hardworking. She's got a high diligence and fairly low dependence. She's fairly independent character, I guess, from the farming and the climatology. It's probably a lonely profession up on a mountaintop somewhere working in that. But she has got a little low patience. She's a little quick to anger, so she might be a little bit hot under the collar at times. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
If
kind
you,
of the.
if you don't buff
Sorry.
her arbor in combat, she's going to give you a little bit of lip.
That's it, and we can sort of have a look at what's Ling here. He was born on Lisbon. His parents were climatologists, but he was a sky addict at one point, and then worked as a plumber. So he's kind of got a bit of a downward. Sky is one of the drugs in the universe. So obviously he's got a bit of a downward trajectory, and we can have a look at his personality here, and it looks like he's a very agreeable person, very gentle and very patient. And he's actually very open to new experiences, very artistic, creative. But we can see here, look at how low that prudence is. That's his internal judgment of whether this is a good idea or not. It's very low. So that's obviously why he got himself into some trouble. He was kind of very creative and open, and then also not very wise, I guess would be the best way to put that. So
However,
yeah,
he's great to drink with. You want to
that's
go,
right.
go for
He's the life
drinks.
life of the party. Exactly. He's pretty
Yeah.
lively and pretty outgoing. So yeah, it's just really neat to see. And of course, every time we sort of recruit a new series of characters, we get new things. So let's have a look at Sear here, who was born on a Fiera, because we haven't had anybody else. Oh, she lost a parent in an industrial accident. So we can already see, over here that that's really affected her. Her grief is fairly high already, and her sort of vigilance. So she's kind of always on edge a bit and a bit sad. Anyway, then worked part time in the mines and then worked into off world shipping. So she's really not. She's kind of moved around a lot, and if we kind of see, I guess some of her agreeableness is low, so she's kind of moving around a lot, and sociability is really low. Has a hard time, bonding to people and stuff like that. Um, so it's kind of interesting to see, the effect that, and these are just a handful of little events and the effect they have on these characters and their backgrounds, and that'll then affect the way these characters interact with other people and interact to, affect their relationships with each other and with you. And so yeah, pretty kind of neat. I'm gonna, we can sort
It's
of
really
stop
cool
there.
to see this stuff like live in the game because most time when I'm working on it, I'm like, we're in a spreadsheet, we're in like a Google Doc, and we're like writing these things out. And then to see those events actually like, because those were dynamically generated characters. When you were
Correct.
bringing them up to recruit, those were just being made on the fly. These new
Exactly, by
characters
the
that have gone
game,
through these
creating
life
these whole
choices.
backgrounds, and like I say,
Yeah.
that's from a
So
very limited subset of choices right now. That as you get your hands on the system, will be populating out and filling out with all kinds of parameters, and it's really
yeah.
neat that the whole event system is governed by these what we call flow trees, but they're these. We're basically creating neural networks. We're creating human brains when we connect all these parameters up, and it's so. I mean, I've been doing this with the system for a while, and Mal has yet. We've actually got a demo scheduled next week to sort of go through it together, so you can start getting your hands on it. But
Yeah. It'd be awesome.
it's, I mean, boy, it's mind blowing when we start playing with it and start seeing the possibilities that it brings. And as you say, it's to think that that's all doing it in real time. Is I think it's going to be
I think
really exciting to see where it goes.
I think a really neat thing too is that people are going to see characters in the game and they'll be like, "That's me." You're going to encounter people that have very similar life experiences to you,
Right.
and have maybe some of the same issues. So it might be great for introspection too. You might be like, "Wow, I had some of that, and yeah, I kind of feel the same way." I have trouble like bonding in social scenarios, and maybe that is because of some of these events. Not like it's going to substitute a therapist or anything like that, but it might be sort of nice, both sort of in a way to maybe identify things and also just to feel like people get you. There's representation for you in this game.
And that was really neat. We had that with some of the people that experienced the demo at some of the shows that we've taken it to, where they would go through these stories with these characters, some of the ones that we wrote early on, and they would really identify with them. They'd say, "Oh, my friend is, suffers from addiction," and they sort of, the responses are very similar. Or I have panic attacks, and it was really great seeing, this character go through that and watching the different ways you could interact with that character. And so yeah, it is pretty neat to sort of see that. I mean, or maybe if I can share my screen one more time, I can show one more
Sure.
thing. Which I didn't think to show the first time, which is some of the character, animations and stuff like that. So this is we've just I mean, I'm always blown away by the capacity of our team and the sort of the things we can do. We can talk a little bit to Mag here, and I'm gonna sort of skip through her conversation a bit fairly quickly. But in the end, Mag is actually dealing with an addiction issue and is in denial about it. So one of the things we're trying to do when we talk to Mag is to sort of get to the root of, okay, what's the best way to break through to her. And it turns out in her case, it's her love for the team. But as we sort of go through some of these things, we start to reveal in her story, in this particular slice, she's just had an argument and a bit of a scuffle with a fellow teammate. So we can see that reflected in the characters. She's got a bruise on her cheek. Other characters who are maybe not sleeping because they're having nightmares might have bags under their eyes. But it's the depth of the animation, and the audio is all dynamic, kind of driven by the character's personality. You can see as we get deeper into this argument, she starts to get a little more angry. She's scowling at us a bit here, and now she starts to get really cross. And so it's just really cool, the depth of the expression and things like that. So there's so many cues. There's the writing, there's the animation, there's the audio. And it all comes together to make this really immersive experience. So I'm super excited by it.
Yeah, and Jake's audio is really
Oh,
good. The music that he puts together, and even just like the amount of attention he's paying to like even small sound cues that will fit with the music, but will trigger just right for all of the audio. It's gorgeous to listen to.
oh, we actually did a live stream, so we'll you can find that on our social media too. That with Jake about his
Yeah.
audio process, and he does some live music performance, and it's just astounding. Well, I mean, you do the same thing with your writing sprints. You do live writing, and I don't know how you guys create on the fly like that. It's so I have to kind of really think it through and take my time, because my first ideas are never the exactly the right ones. But yeah, no, I just I marvel at the creativity that we've got on this team across all the
That's
different aspects. It's
really an
it's really
amazing team.
exciting. Cool. Well, I hope that gives people a bit of a teaser for what the story is going to be like and where it's going to go. I mean, we could talk a bit about the direction it's going to head in, but I think we'd get too close to some spoilers, because there are going to be some big twists and turns along the way. So I
Yeah,
think the
exactly.
the best thing is just to let people, first of all, check out Lucidium Run. If you haven't got a copy, grab a copy. If you want, try and enter the competition to try and win your copy. Create your own character with the personality scales that you saw in the game, and give the demo a try. It's live on Steam right now. We're updating the build tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern. So that'll have
Cool.
some new functionality in it. So yeah, definitely by tomorrow, if you want to check out the build, it's going to be pretty exciting. Wish listed on Steam, and you'll be kept up to date with all the changes and updates and things. But
Mhm.
thank you very much, Mel, for taking the time to walk us through
Absolutely.
the story and the universe, because I think that the possibilities are endless, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's huge. It's gonna be amazing. It's gonna I could down the road see this being even just parts of this, like the all this character stuff being a way to create dynamic characters that people could use in all sorts of situations, not just our games.
Sure.
So it's and we're building it, with that in mind, that this is something that could transcend the game. So we're putting more effort into this than most people put into the game. I feel like it's
Yeah.
a
Oh no, the
the
Insight
entire
Engine
game.
is definitely the core of the experience for sure, and it is a beast unto itself.
It is, yeah, it's amazing. I applaud your desire to undertake something as incredible as this. It's really amazing.
That's often what happens to me, is I get to the end of a process and I think, boy, if I'd known how tough it was going to be at the outset, I probably wouldn't have started. But I'm good at biting off more than I can chew. So that I guess that's what you have to do to have that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Is that those
Well, yeah, that's how
blinders?
amazing stuff is built.
Yeah, for sure. You got to take that leap
Oh,
of faith, or that craziness, depending on which way you look at it.
exactly. All right, Ken. Well, thanks
Thanks
for
so much,
chatting.
Mel, and we'll see you all next time.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.